Konnichiwa. These are your hosts, Jose
Martin.
and Jose. And each time let's say to A Drink with the Past, where we discuss pitfalls and success from areas of global history while enjoying some drinks. In today's episode, we are traveling back to Japan to revisit the anniversary of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We are also returning to our drink of Ukumitsu sake from Kanazawa, courtesy of Martin over here. So sit back, pour your drink of choice, and yasuraka ni nemuru as we take a drink with the past.
Kampai.
Okay. Where are we? As far as history goes.
So, as far as history goes, as you have just mentioned, this year actually marks 80 years since the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that eventually ended World War II. All right, so basically, the war in Europe was over after April, and then the war in the Pacific was still going. And after the decision to drop these two atomic weapons on Japan, that officially ended a years-long war that cost millions of lives and basically, so much carnage was happening in the world at that point. So basically, let's start off with after Pearl Harbor, right? So after Pearl Harbor is done, right, Japan succeeds in their surprise attack against the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, right? So America at this point was crippled at this point. So the American people wanted to get back at Japan so bad that basically a lot of Americans started enrolling for the military. Marines, Army, the reserves, you name it, right? A lot of Americans were beginning to enlist in the military, not just men, but women as well, right? And of course, you have the Americans who didn't enlist in the Army. They basically went to work in the factories, right? They went to work in factories making tanks, jeeps, guns, artilleries,
Right.
naval ships, right? So basically, America was basically all hands on deck at this point, okay? So basically, it took months for America to recover, right? And then you have Japan continuing their campaign in Southeast Asia, right? Literally hours after Pearl Harbor, I think the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, they attacked the other American territories and even the British territories. So Wake Island, Guam. They went on to the Philippines, and then they took over Hong Kong.
Was it like a solo campaign? I don't remember, from the last time we were talking about this with Pearl Harbor. Are they sieging these areas solo, or are they establishing an alliance with other people within the war itself at that time?
Japan was all alone.
Okay.
On their side of the world, right? Because Germany and Italy were already occupied with things in Europe already as it is, right? So Japan was basically doing their own thing within their sphere of the world, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so months of preparations, right? Months of planning. The War Department is coming together and they're basically saying, okay, how are we going to get back at Japan? We need to hit them hard. We need to let them know how it feels to get hit on their homeland. So basically, the idea was to bomb Tokyo, to try to bomb Tokyo itself, the heart of Japan itself.
So the two that end up getting affected in the process weren't even the intentional targets at first. Okay. I guess you could explain why Tokyo out of all places in Japan.
Honestly, Tokyo is the capital of Japan, and of course that's where the emperor lives.
Okay.
when you attack a country's capital, you know, it shows that, hey, this city is not as strong as it is. That it's also vulnerable. That this country is also vulnerable, not just our country as well.
I guess my thought process is like, when they attacked us, they didn't really attack the capital of the U.S. They didn't really go to D.C. itself.
Well, they can't because it's so far. It's so far.
They went to where most of the military base, where most of like our military ammunition was. But is it like that in Japan, where it's like spread out, or is it all just centralized in Tokyo? As far as military
so the military headquarters is in Tokyo, but of course you have military areas around Japan. So like I said, after the Meiji Restoration and the demotion of the daimyos, right? They had to leave their castles. The castles ended up being in control of the new imperial military, right? So basically, cities that used to have been like big castle towns were like military bases too.
Okay.
Right, military. So of course, one of those cities is Hiroshima. Hiroshima was a military.
That used to be a castle town that you mentioned, or
well, Hiroshima used to be a castle town as well, but then it became a military base.
Similar to Nagasaki, or was that also just more rural?
Nagasaki, there was military activity because there's a port also, and a lot of things do go in and out of Nagasaki, like the coal. Like there's an island off the coast of Nagasaki where Japan gets their coal from. Right, that's known as Battleship Island. But I
asked this because you know more about this than I do, because you've been to Japan more than once and you've seen the geography. I was going to say geology.
The geography, not geology. Why would I say the rocks of Japan?
The rocks. Yeah, we're gonna go back to rocks now, guys.
So they did months. It was months and months of preparations of what they had to do. Months of preparing, and the idea was to have long-range bombers bomb Japan. And at this point, it was like, well, wait a minute. These long-range bombers aren't like the planes that we have today, where they can go so far a distance, right? So basically, the crazy plan was to launch these bombers off of aircraft carriers, like about 200 miles away from Japan. Right. So basically, what this event was known as was the Doolittle raid. Okay, and it happened on April 18th, 1942. Right. And it was basically commissioned by Commander James Doolittle of the U.S. Army.
Okay.
And there were 16 B-25 Mitchell medium bombers. All right, 16.
I can only imagine what that looks like. Obviously, I mean, for references, it'll probably be mentioned in the afterwards, the editing.
And these carriers were put on the USS Hornet, on the aircraft carrier Hornet.
Trying to visualize it. Okay.
Yeah. And they were all crammed on the deck of the aircraft carrier, like on the top deck. They were all right there. And there were no fighter escorts. So these B-25 bombers were basically on their own. They had no fighter escorts, nothing. So basically, they had to fend for themselves. And they basically had to try not to get killed. Before getting to your destination, basically. And basically, they bombed Tokyo. They bombed key industries in Tokyo, right? They bombed those. And then the goal was to make it to free China. Basically, the area of China that was not occupied by the Japanese.
Okay.
So basically, untouched China by the Japanese.
I was gonna say which areas, but you mean it's just
because at this point China,
Manchuria,
because Manchuria was already occupied, that northeastern part of the country, and then the coastal regions of China were occupied by Japan.
Okay.
So the mainland of China wasn't occupied by the Japanese. Yeah.
Right.
So the bombers' main goal was to land in that area of China.
Okay.
So that way the Chinese can help them too, since we were allies with China at that point.
Okay, I see where you're getting at. Okay, so what did that end up happening, or like once they deployed them, or
So yeah, so the operation goes smoothly, right? They end up flying, right, and then basically they hit their targets, and they end up flying to China, right? But eventually, what was it? So
When
before takeoff, they were actually supposed to be at a certain level, right? That they were about 650 nautical miles from Japan. So this was like 7:38 in the morning, right, on April 18th. They were 650 nautical miles from Japan, right? So basically, they had to be like around
they had to be farther
100,
out
like 200 miles. They were supposed to be like 200 miles close
by
to
that
Japan.
okay, so by that time they were supposed to be farther out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they were spotted by the Japanese Navy, right? And then
So they weren't fast enough with how far they had to be, so they get caught.
yeah, but so then they had to launch right away.
Okay.
And so they launched. It was a success, right? And then they bomb Tokyo. They get onto China. Almost all the planes had to crash land because of they didn't have enough fuel with them. They didn't have enough fuel, or they used up all their fuel. But luckily, one of those planes actually made it to the Soviet Union,
Okay.
right? And then the other planes crash landed. And then I think one of the planes, one of the planes crashed in the Japanese occupied area of China, right?
Right. Okay.
And so basically, yeah. So Vladivostok at Vodsvizhinka. Yeah, it's like beyond Vladivostok. It's like 40 miles from Vladivostok, where one of the aircrafts had to go, right?
Okay.
And so yeah, so then there's that. And then all of a sudden you have the Battle of Midway, which was the largest naval battle in World War II that consisted of aircraft carriers.
So it's mostly just an air battle at that point.
It was like an air battle, and basically just trying to destroy each other's aircraft carriers, because the main goal at this point is to sink the aircraft carriers. That's the main goal now in this, and it happened in June.
Okay.
Yeah, it happened in June. So 2 months later, it's like, okay, we gotta defend Midway. That's where the Japanese are gonna go now. So we're gonna wait for them. So they wait for them. The Japanese thought they had a surprise, but then they realized they don't. And so the United States basically destroy all 4 Japanese aircraft carriers
Okay.
that were there.
So
they only lose one, which was the Yorktown. They lose the Yorktown in that battle. Yeah, we lose the Yorktown, and so comes Guadalcanal, which happens in August. The first official land invasion of Japanese territory, occupied territory, is going to be the Battle of Guadalcanal in August of that same year of 1942, right? So this was the first offensive that by the U.S. Marines. At this point, the U.S. Marines were in charge of fighting the Japanese. They were in charge of the Pacific theater, while the Army was going to be in charge of doing Europe. So the Marines are sent in, right? And, the war is going on. A lot of things are happening, right? A lot of terrible things, because they're an unfamiliar territory, unfamiliar terrain, because, never in our country's history, we've ever fought in a terrain like the Pacific or in Southeast Asia. Never in our entire history. I mean, if you only count Well, if you count the Spanish-American War, I guess you can count that because there was fighting in the Philippines and then in Cuba, right? But not for a long time.
Cuba's definitely
but not for a
smaller.
long, yeah, but not for a long time because that war was like a year. That was like over, right? But nevertheless, there were some conditions. But in a war where you're fighting for many years in the same areas in the same terrains, especially where it rains a lot, that was a lot to cope for these Marines.
Okay.
That was a lot to cope, right? Because again, they were in unfamiliar terrain and unfamiliar territory, so they don't know what's going to happen in here, right? A flash flood would happen. You get bitten by a poisonous insect or a poisonous snake, right? And it's like you have dysentery, malaria,
Yeah.
and all those diseases, right?
So-
they had to deal with. So it kind of slows the process down in the Pacific. It did slow a lot, and MacArthur's plan was basically to do what's known as island hopping.
MacArthur, like James MacArthur? Or.
General Douglas MacArthur.
Oh, okay.
Douglas
I've only heard MacArthur like a few times in history, so I almost thought you're talking about James, but anyway.
So Douglas.
So he.
So Douglas MacArthur
Does
comes up
island-
with a plan called island hopping. Okay, and basically island hopping is basically we have to advance to Japan by bypassing heavily fortified Japanese positions and capturing strategically important islands.
Just islands where they have like imports and exports of supplies, or just
like supplied air bases and naval bases, basically.
Okay, got it.
Like, forget about fighting the Japanese that are like occupying islands where there's like a huge number of Japanese soldiers. We just need to go to strategic places like airfields and all that.
So the general wants to do like a game of hopscotch, just trying to avoid areas where they're just going to be sitting ducks at this point.
Basically, the Japanese are like sitting ducks, basically.
Where
In the heavily fortified places, the Japanese would be sitting ducks because we would be occupying islands that are strategic bases of operations, like the air bases and the naval bases. So we occupy those, and then the Japanese soldiers are basically stranded on those other islands. Okay. They have nowhere to go. So that's MacArthur's plan.
So after that strategy, so then what happens? What comes out of this invasion in Guadalcanal?
Well, the invasion of Guadalcanal is basically we end up occupying the island. A few months later, like the following year, we occupy Guadalcanal, and then the Marines, other divisions, move on to more islands, right, such as Peleliu, and then all those islands that people don't really know about. So Tarawa, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Peleliu, right? And eventually we get to Okinawa, right? So the Battle of Okinawa happens in basically in the summer of 1945, right?
Oh, this is like 3 years after they start this island hopping strategy.
Basically, yeah. So the war in Europe was in its final stages already at this point.
By
right?
45 or by 42?
No, 45.
Okay.
Like 45. No, Germany was already at its final stage, right? The Red Army, the Soviet Union, was closing into Berlin, and then the America and the British and the French were doing their thing in Western Europe, while the Soviets were doing their thing in the East, right? And all was going to go according to plan, right? And so Okinawa was going to be the last and final battle of World War II at this point, right?
Was it? Or
It was actually the last battle that happened, right? There was really like nowhere else to go after that because Okinawa was closest, right? Okinawa, that's now close to Japan.
so the atomic weapon, this was being built. Was it built after after Pearl Harbor, or was this always like going on even during this whole situation with Japan?
So the Manhattan Project was basically started right after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Okay. All right, I see.
So yeah, it was active in 1942. That was where President Roosevelt called in the top scientists of the time, right? Einstein, Albert Einstein was the one who created the formula for the atomic bomb. He was the one that basically found out the scientifics around it and did like the equations and everything, right? He basically found the equation for the atomic bomb of what it needs to be, right?
Okay.
And after that, it just went to another group of scientists. So he created the plans, and it goes off to a group of scientists, and they do the rest of the building of the bomb.
So Battle of Okinawa is happening. You said it's the last official war in World War II.
Yeah.
And then what comes out of that?
So what comes out of that is basically now how are we going to go about with the invasion of Japan itself? So the original plan was to basically use Okinawa as a base of operations and basically do a D-Day situation that happened in Normandy in France the year prior in 1944, right? So they were planning on doing a Normandy on Japan.
Okay.
So they were going to invade Japan, the actual home island of Japan, right? And they were going to fight the Japanese on their own island, right? But the wrong thing about that, now here's the thing, people may have thought like, oh, well, they didn't do their thinking, right? They only did that because they're racist. Well, yes, they were racist, right? They were racist, but anyways, it was like, but they thought about things militarily as well. They were like, well, we already know what's happening. We know what happened these past couple of years of the time we've been fighting against the Japanese, right? They're stubborn people. They're really stubborn people. They'll go all on out at any cost to try to claim victory. Like no matter where that was, like we've seen that too many times. Guadalcanal, Pele Lu, Okinawa, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, right? It's like, we already seen it. Like we know the outcome of how it's going to be. And at this point, a lot of Americans were dying, but also Japanese, right? They were dying too. And so, what was it? Basically, it ends up going to the point like, okay, if we do invade Japan, if we invade the home islands, what are we looking at? And they've decided in the end, they were like, this is going to cost a million lives. A million people are going to die from both sides, not just military people, but civilians are heavily going to die as well, especially civilians who are going to like try to fight, right? Because the Japanese have been training their citizens to fight against the Americans if the Americans were to invade the home islands, right?
Right.
So basically, they were like thinking about this. They're like, oh, well, it's better to look at so it's better to have this bomb that's being made by Oppenheimer, right? Oppenheimer is still making the bomb, right? He has his team building it, and then basically, of course, President Roosevelt dies right after the surrender of Germany. I believe, yeah, after the surrender of Germany, Roosevelt dies, and then Truman, the vice president, takes control of the country, right? Basically, is the next in line.
Right.
And so he was completely out of the Manhattan Project because obviously...
Yeah. So was it at that point when he decided to change course with where to drop it?
So the way how they implemented this was basically they had to choose which cities were military areas, right? That were key military areas. And so, of course, ironically, Hiroshima happened to be one of them, right? And so they ended up picking Hiroshima. They picked a city called Kokura. They picked Nagasaki. You know, amongst other cities, right? And at first they wanted to put Kyoto on the map, right? But how
Was there even military presence in Kyoto at that point?
No,
So
not really military, but it was like, and it was really the cultural heritage, right? It was a cultural heritage of Japan. So you had Hiroshima and of course Nagasaki, right? But also the removal of Kyoto. So Secretary of War Henry Stimson, who was the Secretary of War of the United States, he was able to successfully advocate for the removal of Kyoto from the list due to, you know, its cultural significance. Because
I mean, I feel like it would make sense. I'm like, they didn't come for the Japanese didn't come here for the culture. As far as when they did the bombing of Pearl Harbor, when they attacked us, they didn't come here for the culture. They came for, you know, the crippling effects that it had on on our military. So I feel like Truman wanting to like initially suggest that, I feel like it's just more so like neglecting the goal that they had in mind during that time period.
yeah, so after that, right, in July 16th of 1945, the Manhattan Project moved from Connecticut to doing the actual testing of the bomb. And they decided to do it in New Mexico, right? They decided to do it in a desert in New Mexico.
Hoping no one was going to ingest any of the scent of the chemicals. To where the story goes.
Yeah. So they tested. It was successful, right? And so now was the time for the approval. And so President Truman ends up giving the approval about the list and the use of the bomb. And so it's up to the military now to do their job in delivering the bomb. And the ship that was going to do the mission, right? The naval ship that was going to do the mission was the USS Indianapolis, right? So this cruiser, the USS Indianapolis, was in charge of delivering the bomb to the island where they were going to launch the plane, right? That was going to drop the bomb.
Okay, the cruiser had the plane that was going to... Okay, got it. Okay, now I know where this is going. Okay, so how long was that? Like another months after Okinawa, or was this pulled off for longer at that point?
Fighting was still happening in Okinawa at that point. Many people were still dying.
So, they bring the Indianapolis to... I'm assuming they bring it into Japan territory at that point.
The Indianapolis was in American free territory, right? But unfortunately, on the way back from the mission, they were torpedoed by a Japanese submarine.
It's like never mind.
So the ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and it sunk. Right. Okay. And there is a movie about that, the USS Indianapolis, starring Nicolas Cage, who plays as the captain of that ship.
Got it.
So watch it. It's a good movie.
So
they receive it, right? And they end up doing the actual launch. Tinian, that the island was named Tinian. Tinian Island was the location of where the bomb was sent and where the planes would take off.
Take off into those scheduled areas.
Yeah, okay. To take off into dropping the bomb, right? So
bombs are dropped.
So let's see, August 6, 1945, which was a few days ago, basically 10 days ago, the first bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. All right. And basically there were two types of bomb. It was plutonium,
Right.
and help me out here. There's plutonium,
Radium?
and there's radium. Oh man, why is it slipping off the top of my head?
Well, if you're looking at the periodic table, the only ones I know that are like atomic substances are like nuclear substances at the bottom. I know there's plutonium, radium's, I think, some other ones that start with the letter X or something like that. Not xenon. But essentially uranium. Okay.
Uranium and plutonium. So there are they made two types of bomb because uranium was so rare that it
It's
was
man-made,
really hard.
obviously.
Well, it was basically hard to find uranium because obviously there's uranium in places, right, on the rocks or somewhere, right. So uranium was found, right, and so they ended up deciding, well, we don't have enough uranium, so we're just gonna make a plutonium bomb too.
Right.
So we're gonna test two types of bombs.
Okay.
So the one dropped on August 6th on Hiroshima was uranium. All right.
And the plutonium went where?
And then the plutonium one was going to be dropped 3 days later on Nagasaki. Right.
Okay.
So basically, these two bombs were known as Little Boy and Fat Man.
I don't know why. I don't even want to ask what the significance of that.
I don't know why they got.
Let's not even ponder that.
I don't know if it's creative or I don't know. People back in those days are more creative than us today.
The Emperor catches wind of all this.
Yeah. So basically, after the bombs are dropped on these two cities, after the first day, they didn't believe it. Right? They're the higher up Japanese military commanders in Japan, right? They didn't believe it. They were like, "Oh, that's a lie. Oh, that's not true. They can't possibly have. The Americans cannot have possibly made a nuclear weapon at this rate, right? At this rate." So, of course, when they hear about it again 3 days later, that hey, another one was dropped. This time on Nagasaki, they're like, "Oh crud!" And so there were some that was like, "Oh heck, we need to surrender." But then there are, of course, the other ones are like, "No, we need to keep fighting, right? Keeping their dignity, right? Their Bushido beliefs, right? Their samurai spirit beliefs, etc." So
the emperor wants to quit while they're ahead, but you're saying the military. You said this is the point when they wanted to establish a coup at that point. Against the emperor itself because he wanted to broadcast this.
Yeah, so basically it was the Potsdam Declaration, right? The Potsdam Conference that happened in Potsdam, Germany, right? So this was after Germany surrenders, right? And then the reconstruction of the country was happening. And so the world leaders of the Allies, right? Stalin, Churchill, Truman, right? They ended up meeting at Potsdam, right? And basically talking about what to do with Japan. And so it was at this point where they told the Japanese, look, the only way to end this is you only really have one option, is to surrender unconditionally. Unconditional surrender. Right, just surrender.
Yeah.
Right, no conditions. So the war cabinet meet with the emperor, right? And they're talking about it, right?
And then assuming he's considering it.
Basically, yeah. So basically Hirohito was like, you know what? Enough's enough, right? So, right, July 26th of 1945, the Potsdam Conference issued a declaration on the terms for the surrender of Japan. And then when it was received in Japan over shortwave, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Shigenori Togo, brought a copy to the emperor, right, Emperor Hirohito. And after going over the declaration point by point, the emperor asked Togo if those terms were the most reasonable to be expected in the circumstances. And of course, Togo said that, yeah, they were. Those were the circumstances.
Like,
right? And the emperor said, "I agree."
Is it reasonable? I don't know.
Well,
do you want to lose more? I don't know where we're thinking if you don't think this is reasonable to surrender.
Right, and the emperor said, "I agree. In principle, they are acceptable."
Okay.
In late July, however, the other ministers were not ready to accept the declaration.
Okay.
Right, and so after the bombing of Nagasaki, the Soviet Union ends up declaring war on Japan.
Because some of the ministers in Japan didn't want to.
Well, no, because there was still fighting going on in China, remember?
Okay.
Like, there's still fighting going on in China. So, of course, the Soviet... And that was a deal that Stalin made with Roosevelt.
Right. Okay.
That when the war in
in
Europe ended, when the war in Europe
I forgot
ended,
that you told me that he died. He died after that whole declaration.
Then Stalin told Roosevelt, like, hey, when this war ends in Europe, when the war in Europe ends, then I'll go to war against Japan to help you guys, right? So the Soviet ends up declaring war, right? And so on the same day, the Supreme Council for the Direction of War opened before the Japanese Imperial Court. And the council, the Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, the Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yonai, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs Shigenori Togo suggested to Hirohito that the Japanese should accept the Potsdam Declaration and unconditionally surrender at this point.
Assuming now that their one consistent ally turned against them.
Exactly.
Well, after planned cooperation, I guess.
Basically.
That's what happens when their egos get a little too big.
Exactly. And after the closure of the air raid shelter session, Suzuki mustered the Supreme Council for the Direction of War again, now as an imperial conference, which Emperor Hirohito attended. And from midnight of August 10th, the conference convened in an underground bomb shelter. Hirohito agreed with the opinion of Togo, resulting in the acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration. Subsequently, the Japanese envoy to Switzerland and Sweden communicated this decision to the Allies, right? So basically, Hirohito was like, okay, this is it. I am done. We're done doing this. We don't need to surrender, sacrifice more of our people, right? But of course, none of this was happening, right? And so there were these radical military personnel, right? And they said, wait a minute, what the heck's going on here? Don't tell me that he's planning on surrendering, because he's basically going against Japanese beliefs, right? To basically, you can't surrender, right? Because surrendering is forbidden, right? You can't, because that's dishonorable, right? You are bringing shame to our country, right?
I mean, eventually, it still happens, regardless of the radicals and the radicals' belief of the Bushido, movement and stuff. So
basically, they ended up signing something, right?
They signed the treaty.
I guess they signed an agreement with each other, right? Shortly after the Imperial Conference, right, a man by the name of Anami, right? And so basically, like, these commanders, right, Minister Korishika Anami, right, and so they ended up deciding about this coup, right, and Major Kenji Hatanaka, along with Lieutenant Colonels Masataka Ida, Masahiko Takeshita, and Masao Inaba, and Colonel Okikatsu Aro, the chief of the military affairs section, spoke to Anami and asked him to do whatever he could to prevent acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration. In general, Anami refused to say whether he would help the young officers in treason. As much as they needed his support, Hatanaka and the other rebels decided they had no choice but to continue planning and to attempt a coup d'etat on their own. Hatanaka spent much of August 13th and the morning of August 14th gathering allies, seeking support from the higher-ups in the ministry, and refining his plot, right?
So, how long does it take before they finally consider changing their minds and surrendering, considering there's the coup d'etat happening within their own, form of government?
No time, because it was literally like a few days later.
Okay.
It was a few days later. So around 21:30, so 9:30
9:30 p.m.
So around 9:30 p.m. on August 14th, Hatanaka's rebels set their plan in motion. The 2nd Regiment of the 1st Imperial Guards had entered the palace grounds, doubling the strength of the battalion already stationed there, presumably to provide extra protection against Hatanaka's rebellion. Right, but Hatanaka, along with Lieutenant Colonel Jiro Shiizaki, convinced the commander of the 2nd Regiment, Colonel Toyojiro Haga, of their cause by telling him untruthfully that Anami Umezu and the commanders of the Eastern District Army and Imperial Guards Division were all in on the plan. Hatanaka also went to the office of General Shizuichi Tanaka, commander of the Eastern Region of the Army, to try to persuade him to join the crew. However, Tanaka refused and ordered Hatanaka to go home. And then originally, Hatanaka hoped that simply occupying the palace and showing the beginnings of a rebellion would inspire the rest of the army to rise up against the move to surrender, and this notion guided him through much of the last days and hours and gave him the blind optimism to move ahead with the plan despite having little support from his superiors. Having set all the pieces into position, Hatanaka and his co-conspirators decided that the guard would take over the palace at 2 o'clock in the morning. The hours until then were spent in continued attempts to convince their superiors in the army to join the coup. At about the same time, General Anami killed himself, leaving a message that read, "I, with my death, humbly apologize to the emperor for the great crime." Whether the crime involved losing the war, the coup, or both, it still remains unclear. Right?
By this? Like the...
Seppuku.
He did seppuku?
He did seppuku.
I almost forgot the term, so I was like, wait a minute. It's just showing like the sword. Like,
Yeah,
it's something with the sword. I don't remember what it was.
He committed seppuku.
Okay.
And then at around 1 o'clock in the morning, Hatanaka and his men surrounded the palace. And then Hatanaka, Shiizaki, Ida, and Captain Shigetaru Uehara went to the office of Lieutenant General Takeshi Mori to ask him to join the coup. Mori was in a meeting with his brother-in-law, Michinori Shiraishi. The cooperation of Mori as commander of the 1st Imperial Guards Division was crucial. When Mori refused to side with Hatanaka, Hatanaka murdered him, fearing Mori would order the guards to stop the rebellion.
And look where we're at. They're still doing things.
Uehara killed Shiraishi. These were the only 2 murders of the night. Hatanaka
look how far they went. They went so far as to kill 2 people and then get stopped by the Imperial Guard. So
and then Hatanaka then used General Mori's official stamp to authorize Imperial Guards Division Strategic Order Number 584, a false set of orders
literally. I'm gonna
use
use a dead guy's stamp of approval just to bypass the Imperial Guard. Let me see how that works. And then when the Imperial Guard goes over and calls him over, like, hey, did you actually sign this? And he's actually dead on the floor because you just killed him not too long, like 4 seconds ago. Yeah. That clearly is going to go to
And then the palace police were disarmed and all the entrances blocked. And over the course of the night, Hatanaka's rebels captured and detained 18 people, including ministry staff and workers sent to record the surrender speech, right? And then, of course, it was like... Right. Things were like going bait. Right. 2 men were hiding in the bank vault, right? And then they were still searching for the emperor, but luckily one of the emperor's advisors was able to escort the emperor to safety, right? And basically, at dawn, Tanaka learned that the palace had been invaded. He went there and confronted the rebellious officers, berating them for acting contrary to the spirit of the Japanese army. He convinced them to return to their barracks, right? And then by 8 o'clock in the morning, the rebellion was entirely dismantled, having succeeded in holding the palace grounds for much of the night, but failing to find the recordings. And then Hatanaka on a motorcycle and Shiizaki on horseback rode through the streets, tossing leaflets that explained their motives and their actions. Within an hour before the emperor's surrender broadcast sometime around 11 o'clock on August 15th, which was yesterday, Hatanaka placed his pistol to his forehead and shot himself. And Shiozaki stabbed himself with a dagger and then shot himself. And then Hatanaka's
So basically, massive forms of seppuku at this point, except not by sword, but by other means of weaponry. But I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, when you were explaining the story, I was like, I'm surprised they haven't just indicted him and put him in jail. But at this point, like you said, once they broadcast went out, they just eventually unalive themselves. So the broadcast happens.
And the broadcast eventually happens, which was known as which this event became known as the dual voice broadcast.
Dual voice?
The dual voice.
Oh, dual voice. Okay.
It was read by Emperor Hirohito and it was broadcasted. Mm-hmm. And in it, the emperor officially accepted the terms of the Potsdam Declaration, effectively ending Japan's war with the Allies. And it was also the first time that the emperor had addressed the people of Japan over the radio. So this was literally the first time the entire Japanese people heard the emperor's voice.
Yeah, I can only imagine after he was informing his own people, make sure you fight back as soon as you see an American land on our soil, and be like, actually, never mind. You can just let him in. Just leave him alone.
Yeah, so it was literally. So not like in the many years of Japan's history, the entire public ever heard an emperor's voice.
Not even when the emperor does visits around the country?
Well, he rarely did visits, and if anything, he only met with top people.
Well,
so it was the first. So yeah, it was the first time the Japanese people heard the emperor's voice.
Okay.
So that happens, and then the official surrender on paper is signed in September on board the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay.
Okay. So now we can move forward with how, because we mentioned earlier that you've been there multiple times in Japan and you already had the opportunity of going to both sites. And how did you feel after visiting? Well, okay, let's start with which one did you see first? Did you see...
I went to Nagasaki first.
Okay. And how did you feel after going to Nagasaki?
Oh man, where to begin? I mean, that was literally the reason why I went to Japan in the first place. When I first went in 2023 to Japan, it was to go to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right?
Okay. I'd say paint us a picture, but I mean, you can just describe.
I would have to say that in Nagasaki, Nagasaki is now it's a really, really beautiful city. It's green everywhere. Even on the little islands, right in the bay of Nagasaki. Around the bay in Nagasaki. It's green now, but of course, when you go there, you have to still remember about the terrible history that happened there with the atomic bombing, right? In the center of Nagasaki, which is known as Hypocenter Park.
Hypocenter Park?
Hypocenter Park. Basically the area where the bomb exploded.
They made a park out of that?
They made a memorial. Kind of like a memorial. They had a park of sculptures and things like that, but they have a specific sculpture that marks where the bomb was exactly
an X marks dropped. The spot situation?
Yeah, it marked exactly where it was. And so that one was the plutonium made one, and that was a bit more devastating than the uranium one. And so close to it was, of course, the Urami Cathedral, right? The Catholic cathedral in Nagasaki, right? And so that cathedral was destroyed, and everywhere around, right, was destroyed. But of course, the number one thing you notice, of course, is the cathedral. When it got bombed, and when the city got bombed, and some of the old structure of the cathedral is still standing, like the front, the front door.
So they just
the front facade of the cathedral. There's bits of it, but there's statues, and it's all black, right? It's black in. There's shadows on the wall.
So they just
of
leave
these
all that
statues.
untouched in all these years since the bombing occurred. They just
And one of the bell towers is on the side. Like one of the bell towers that blew up, it's on the side.
they just choose to leave it all untouched.
It's left right there. And
Okay.
so they built a new cathedral, which was really beautiful, right? I went to mass there on the weekend. I was in Nagasaki. I actually went to mass there. It was beautiful. The church was really beautiful, right? But right next to it, there was a room, like I guess like the ministry center. You know, like it's like the ministry center, like the office, right? The office of the parish, right? And so inside of there are actually like relics of the things in the cathedral, like chalices,
the
candles.
old one that's next to it, or like that's near it.
What do you mean?
So relics of the old cathedral.
Yeah, basically, from the old cathedral, like chalices, candle stands, a tabernacle, I think. Like there was just a lot of religious artifacts, that's used in mass, in the church, and they have it displayed right there.
Okay.
All right, and it was really just like eye-opening. Like, it was like eye-opening, like jaw-dropping, like just thinking like, oh my gosh, like how like these things are living proof of what exactly happened here all those many years ago.
Right.
So it was just, I don't know, it was just amazing to see that, right? And then of course you have the atomic bomb museum as well
In that
in
pavilion,
Nagasaki.
or is it farther out, like in the country or in the?
Like it's like
It's not in the
a
park.
10-minute walk. It's like a 10-minute walk from the church. I believe it's a 10-minute walk from the church, but like yeah. So there's the atomic bomb museum, and literally it's just.
Is it just remnants of everything?
It's remnants of everything from that happened in Nagasaki.
So I'm assuming there's, based on what you're saying, if there's a museum in Nagasaki that has remnants of that from destruction there, I'm assuming there is one in Hiroshima as well.
Oh yeah, but the one in Hiroshima was way bigger than the one in.
Is it because of
Nagasaki?
Like land size? Just Hiroshima's a much bigger area than Nagasaki itself.
No, it's because a lot of things.
Stuff was destroyed in Hiroshima.
They were able to get more. They were able to get more things.
They procured more stuff in Hiroshima.
They were able to procure more stuff in Hiroshima than they did in Nagasaki. And
one thing I
saw. One thing that you always see is like a replica. It's like the clock itself, like a clock, just like a random clock, like from somewhere.
Like a standard clock in a house?
From a house, from a business, right? There's a clock that's in display in Nagasaki, and it's left exactly at the time the bomb was dropped. The bomb was dropped, 11:02 a.m.
I don't know the science.
Literally, like the clock I saw in the museum, the hands were literally on the same spot that it was when the bomb was.
Must have been an atomic clock.
11:02 a.m.
I don't understand the science of it. Maybe someone will be able to explain the science of that, like just being able to find a clock that has the exact timing. I don't know if what kind of science is behind that, but that's interesting to hear.
So yeah, and then they have like pictures that they took of like the aftermath of the of the bombings, right? Like for example, like wooden walls that shows the silhouettes of things on the walls, such as like a ladder and a person that was standing right next to that ladder. My gosh, it was so eerie. And they literally took the parchment off too. Like they have the wall and they have it in display.
Interesting.
Oh my gosh. And they display like molten materials, like coins that were melted into rocks.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume it's like a chemical explosion of that nature, like affecting copper and nickel and dimes.
Yeah, and then bottles that were melted.
Like I said, there's a science behind, because it's a man-made explosion. It's not like your naturalistic kind of explosion where certain objects would corrode the way that it should. But anything else that you've noticed since your visit to Nagasaki, besides the museum and the cathedral, and the park itself?
No, everything for the most part they rebuilt everything. Like, it's now like a modern city.
Okay.
Like, there's rarely anything that's old in Nagasaki.
Okay.
Because of the bomb, and so everything is modernized, right?
Okay.
And so Nagasaki was a really beautiful city.
So then you end up going to Hiroshima after, not too long after. And how was that visit?
Oh man, Hiroshima was something else, honestly, because and really that's the number one place that a lot of tourists would go to for starters.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when I was on the train going to Nagasaki,
How far
that
is
train
it?
that train was full.
How far is the train ride from? Well, did you end up going from Nagasaki to Hiroshima like right after, or did you?
No, I made stops
okay.
in cities. I didn't go straight over there. I made stops in Kokura, but the reason why I made a stop in Kokura was because not many people know this, but Kokura was supposed to have been the second location where the second bomb was supposed to be dropped before they changed it to Nagasaki, because there was like clouds. There was like. The city was covered, like there were like smoke clouds covering because of like another bombing that took place. I don't think it was a bombing in the Hiroshima, but it was like in a different city where a bombing happened. But like the clouds covered the city, where basically the dropper, right? The person that was looking through that to see the position, he couldn't get a clear shot. So basically, they were like, okay, let's move on to Nagasaki, to the next location. So Kokura was spared from that, right? So basically, that's the reason why. I mean, that's the reason why I went there, just to see like what it was like and basically all that. Sorry, but
in Hiroshima,
was something else. Like
you said
the dome, the building of the bank in Hiroshima is still standing.
The original bank that was there before the atomic bomb. It's
still standing. Like there were damage, but it wasn't like enough to like make it like completely collapse.
I guess you could say that's as far as people go, as when it comes to like how advanced Japan was with how they built their structures. If part of it is still standing and not too much damage was done to it in the process after the explosion.
Right. Yeah. So I went there and there was a feeling. I was just like, wow, like this is just insane. This is insanity right here. And so
did they have the same idea with Nagasaki, with having like a little indicator of where they dropped it when they made
They did, but I couldn't find it.
I mean, it's fine, but I'm assuming like that's why I had to ask. Like,
they did. They have it. They have an indicator, but it's like I couldn't find it. I couldn't find where it was. So the thing is, school kids take field trips to actually see the building, but to also go to the museum as well, and to see the Peace Memorial, the Eternal Fire. They bring kids there to basically learn. It's an education purpose, right?
I mean, and kids were involved originally in the explosion as well, so I can't really be too aghast with the information that I just heard about kids still going on field trips to Hiroshima, at least to that area of the park, to see the buildings and the monuments and stuff, the museum itself.
Yeah, so basically, and they go to a park that's known as the Peace Memorial Park, right? And in the Peace Memorial Park is a monument known as the Children's Peace Monument. And it's dedicated to the children who passed away, who died from the impacts of the bomb. Whether they died right away or if they died
delayed exposure.
To exposure and thing. And basically the monument stands in memory of all children who died as a result of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. And the monument was originally inspired by the death of Sadako Sasaki, who was exposed to radiation from the bomb at the age of 2. 10 years later, Sadako developed leukemia that ultimately ended her life. And then Sadako's untimely death compelled her classmates to begin a call for the construction of a monument for all children who died due to the atomic bomb. Right.
That's just the effects of chemicals on the body.
And it was built in 1958.
She was the first one? First child that died, you said?
Not the first one, but that one impacted her because she was exposed at age 2. She was 2 years old when the bombing happened.
Okay.
And then she was able to somehow live like for like 10 more years.
Okay,
I see. And so basically, there's a stone block under the monument that reads, "This is our cry, this is our prayer for building peace in the world." And of course, there's a bell, right? And one of the things that Sadako loved to do was making origamis.
I just made one yesterday.
Like she loved making them. Even when she was in a hospital, she always made them. But even when she couldn't really
use
her hands so often anymore, she kind of still tried her best.
Yeah.
To make origamis. And so basically, it's just, and kids sing and they bow, right? They bow, they say a prayer, right? And so
they put respect to the name.
Yeah, they put respect to her name. And basically, the museum was just a whole nother thing.
Well, you did say it's like a very tourist heavy place.
Oh yeah, and it's big. This museum is huge. It's huge, and it shows like walls of like testimony from people who survived, right? And so basically, like, yeah, like there's just testimony saying, like, for example, just one that says, "As I looked toward the center of the city, I saw through clouds of thick gray smoke, fires burning in about 7 places. Soon the fires spread over the entire city, filling the sky with gray smoke." Right? And so there were children killed. They have relics of bridges that were destroyed. Like, oh, this is a piece of the bridge that was destroyed, or these are children's clothes. These are the clothes of children, and like this is a brick that was leveled up. Right, there's a wall that was leveled up. Like they just have a lot of things. Even drawings, scary drawings that would basically question everything. Like.
Drawings
about life. Basically, it makes you question about like
life in Hiroshima.
During the explosion. What did life look like after the explosion? And these drawings were so realistic. I was just like, holy crap! Like they are so like this is just so like a whole nother level. And of course, they took a piece of the bank. There was a piece of the bank that they took a curb, and there was a shadow displayed because the story about it was that there was someone sitting on the step waiting for the bank to open. And so,
well,
I guess he didn't get his.
I guess he never got his money or never got his business taken care of.
Unfortunately. Sad. But yeah, and then they did pictures of the people who survived, right? The radiation and everything, right? And so, yeah, like it was just insane just thinking about that. And it showed pictures of people who died, right? Like family members of the people who died would donate people's clothes to the museum when it was built, saying like, hey, this belonged to so-and-so, right?
Right.
And then basically it tells a story about this person, of their relic, right? About their things. And it tells a story about the person, or like from like a diary or something. And for example, one girl was named Shioko Sawada, right? So it was like certificates. There were these certificates that belonged to her. It says that this girl was 18 years old. She left for the factory where she had been mobilized and went missing. Almost 2 months after the atomic bomb, her parents received a notice from a neighboring county's village office that they collected her remains together with the wallet and death certificate. She had died on August 10th. Shioko's portrait and her fiancé's were found in the wallet. Their younger daughter, Miyoko, who was 15, was also killed in the bombing. Right. And so here's a testimony that's written by her mother. Each time I see a girl of around my daughter's age on the street, I wonder, is this Shioko or is that Miyoko? I wish they would run out of some alley and throw themselves into my arms, saying, Mom, no, no, they are both dead and gone. That day, Chieko left home, leaving her last words, I will make delicious soup for Father today, and has gone.
Well, Yasuraka ni nemuru to that.
To everyone, but I mean, that museum, there was no time where I didn't cry. There was like no place, like there was like no, not a scene, not a minute when I was in there, like I didn't shed a tear, right? There wasn't a minute where like I wasn't like shedding tears, right? Because honestly, it was like, so like when my cousin visited the museum too, because my cousin was the one who told me about it, and so like he visited it and he was crying too, he said in the end, and I was crying too, and it was like, you know what, like if people cry,
if people that aren't even native to Japan are like, crying about this,
right? It was like, look, if you cry in Auschwitz, if you ever visited Auschwitz in Poland, right? If you ever visit and you cry, right? If you cry there, right? You feel emotional right there, then there's no reason why, like, there's no reason why you wouldn't be crying
going to Hiroshima.
In Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Well, basically Hiroshima, and acting the same way when you enter that museum, right? It's like, it shows you just how far humanity had to go to basically end a war that was killing millions of people, but for the sake of saving millions of other people from dying as well. So basically, it was like it had to take the sacrifice of a couple thousand people.
Well,
Like they say, like a couple of thousands of people to end a brutal war that was going nowhere. Right? That was going nowhere. And of course, I still stand by my statement that, you know what, Yamamoto was right. That Admiral Yamamoto was correct in saying that Japan should not have gone to a war with the United States.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but yeah, those were my experiences in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right, you know, it's a beautiful. They're beautiful cities now. They're worth visiting. A lot of yummy places to go. A lot of yummy foods, and you know, great people, and just great cities. You know, now they become great cities in Japan, and so basically, 80 years have gone by, and the people of Japan are still remembering it. They're still honoring the victims who died from it, and even in Nagasaki, the Catholics in Nagasaki does a procession of a statue of the Virgin Mary that somewhat survived
the explosion,
like the bombing. Right, the Catholics in Nagasaki, they do a procession of it every year, and so
Well, with that, for those that have made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you liked what you heard, make sure to like, and then comment below what you liked about this episode, or any thoughts that you might have about, you know, this whole ordeal with everything from the World War itself to post-World War in Japan. And with that, we will be sending off this episode. Thank you guys, and thank you guys, and to the people who've been affected by the bombings and all the destruction that happened in Japan.
Especially for the victim.
Yasuraka ni nemuru. And thank you guys as we take a drink with the past.